Welcome to today's episode of the Everyday Leader podcast. Tate and I are super excited to bring the man, the myth, the mustache, Dallon Schultz to today's episode. We'll explore his journey both in real estate, creating a successful multifamily syndication fund, and also launching a software company, and the lessons he's learned about leadership along the way.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. We're super excited to have Dallon Schultz with us today. I'm Drew Norton. This is Tate Hoisington. We empower people to live like everyday leaders. The definition we have of leadership is enrolling others in visions greater than they ever thought possible. And excited to talk to a great leader today, Dallin. And him and I have been friends for quite some time, and excited to hear some of his experiences today around leadership.
Yeah, I'm honored that you guys even asked me, and you're only a few episodes in,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I'm honored to be a part of this, and hopefully we share some value with you and your listeners today.
Awesome. Well, Dallin, could you start by just telling our audience a little bit about your professional background, kind of your journey to where you're at?
Yeah, Cliff Notes version of that. I did the thing. I went to college. I got a degree, like we're taught, we're told. A few months into that career, I realized it's not what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, at that time, I actually broke my leg playing soccer, and that forced me to rethink what I wanted for my future, for my life. And I realized that the path I was on wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to be. Like my mind fast forwarded 10, 15, 20 years, and I realized if I stayed on that path, it wasn't going to be where I wanted to be. So it forced me to take a step back and really think about what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be, and that got me into real estate. I always wanted to get into real estate investing, but in my mind, it was always, I'll get into it when. I always had an excuse to kick the can down the road to delay it, but that incident got me started right away. And within a few short months, we bought our first investment property without any of our own money. A couple months after that, we got into a second one. And from there, it just kept learning and growing. And now we're involved in large multi-million-dollar apartment buildings and self-storage facilities, and recently launched a software company to help other people like us raise private money to do these types of deals.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I've seen that journey the whole time as a friend of yours, and so it's just been incredible to see you progress and grow, not just in your business, but also as a leader for other people. And we view you as a leader. That's why we wanted to have you on this podcast.
Appreciate
today.
that.
Yeah.
So touching on kind of like the journey of you coming to the realization that you wanted to do bigger and better things, and the injury that kind of led to that. I've experienced some of that myself in kind of a different way, family business, and kind of coming to that realization that, hey, maybe this isn't, the existence I want. And so I don't know if you have a little more to offer on that, but I'd be interested in, just kind of coming to that realization.
Yeah, that's a great question. From a young age, looking back, I always had an entrepreneur spirit. I didn't know it at the time, but I remember I grew up on 100 acres of land with all my family on my dad's side. This was in upstate New York. So my aunts, uncles, cousins, it was a blast. And I remember at a young age, me and my other cousin, we were at a family function. We're like, man, we want to make some money. Let's go make some cleaning coupons. And then we sold it to our family members at that family function,
awesome.
just to clean their bedroom, clean the laundry room. And I don't remember how much we made. But there's that instance, and then that same cousin, we the way our basement was set up in our house, it kind of horseshoed around this central room. And one Halloween, we turned that horseshoe hallway into a haunted house, and we had all these strings pulling things down from the ceiling rafters, and it all funneled into this central room, and that was like our control center. That was our command center, and we were cutting strings, and we'd hear the screams, so we'd know where people were at. And we charged family members, again, we called it the compound. We charged them like $1 to come to the haunted house. So there's little things like that looking back on that I realize now that I always wanted to create. I enjoyed creating, and I loved making an impact. And that's part of the reason that career I left was in the medical field. I was had my bachelor's in nursing, and I wanted to specialize, make a few $100,000 a year, and I got into that because I wanted to make an impact. And I think it was just going through the experiences I did that just with time and experience, I realized, hey, if I take that entrepreneur spirit, combine it with wanting to make an impact, it's like the perfect recipe to be a business owner. And I think that's where a lot of business owners are born from. And to be a business owner, a successful one, you got to know how to lead as well. Yeah. So obviously that's probably one of the reasons why you asked for me to be on the show.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you.
What would you say early on going through that? Who were leaders, or who were people that inspired you to maybe take some of those steps, to maybe move out of your comfort zone? Like, what were some examples of maybe some leadership you've seen that have influenced you?
So that's a great question. I think a lot of that came from self-study. Around that time where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life after that injury, I started reading books, started listening to podcasts, and then I started realizing that there was other people that thought and felt like I did. But prior to that, I was in you go to school, you get a degree. So I was around, I don't want to say those types of people, but like that mindset, right? And a lot of us just don't know. That's how we're raised. So when I started listening to podcasts and reading books, I started being inspired by a lot of these influential people, especially in the real estate space. And indirectly to that, I would say my grandfather, he was probably the most entrepreneurial person in our family at the time. And then I had an older cousin that was as well, that ended up starting a telemedicine company. And when COVID hit, freaking blew up. But this was before that, so I wasn't as aware of what he was doing in his life or his career. I just knew he had little things going on. So for me, it was a lot of at the start, it was a lot of just books and podcasts. And the great thing is it cost me hardly nothing to get started on those.
Well, especially with social media the way it is today, between the TikToks, Instagram, Reels, I mean, it's just so much knowledge out there. And even if it's just a piece that gets you started down a path to, go get somebody's book or something. But yeah, that's amazing. I can relate. Absolutely.
And the information's great. The knowledge is important. They used to say, like, knowledge is power. Yes, but like literally you can find it on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in how to, and you can find literally anything you want. So I think, especially in this day and age now, where people are making the difference is not necessarily having the knowledge, but the ability to execute and that discipline there, especially now because our society and younger generations, it's all about the quick fix, the quick win. And so this ability to have that discipline and the work ethic, and that was one thing that I, looking back, maybe not so much influential, but a good trait that my father taught me was how to work. Because growing and starting a business definitely requires a lot of work and doing things you don't want to do. So that definitely helped. But knowledge is great. Information is great. It helps you gain clarity sometimes on what you want, but then you got to execute on it. And the execution, in my opinion, is what's going to set successful business owners apart from other ones.
I'm sure I know what some of these are, and I'd love for you to share what some of those influential books were, or the thought leaders that really helped inspire you as you're going through that.
Different books have hit me at different times. So the few that I'll share with you, it's just what I needed at that point in my life. The very first one I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Classic. Robert Kiyosaki. Never heard of the dude before until I started listening to podcasts. And then people kept talking about him. They kept talking about his book. I got that book. I couldn't put it down. That was the only book that I recall reading for leisure outside of college and school from an assignment. And his book, he talks about passive income and business, and something in my brain clicked. Like I told you, this was kind of laying dormant my whole life. And as a kid, and as I got older, I went down the college path. And so it was tucked away back there, and I didn't know it was like a little pilot light, if you will. And then I read that book, and oxygen flowed float into that pilot, and it became this flame. So something sparked in me. And after reading that book, it was literally 2 weeks later, we had our first fourplex without any of our own money. And prior to that, my mind was go to school, get a degree. When you're 40 or 50, then get into real estate. And here I was at that time, 26, 25, 26 at the time. And then 2 months later, we bought a second one. So I had 8 units. I'm like, the only limitation I had was the one I was putting on myself. Yeah. So that was probably one of the most influential books. And it just came at the right time for me. I've talked to people that are like, yeah, I read it. It was okay. So what? So I think it just came at the right time. One of my all-time favorites, I probably recommend this one the most, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And then the third one, there's a lot, but the third one that I will mention, and again, a lot of these came just at the right time, and that's why they stick out to me. The third one is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and that's more of a spiritual book. And the reason that one stuck out to me is because I think as entrepreneurs and business owners, we're very futuristic thinking. And so for me, I'm always living in the future, which is exciting. You can create a vision. You can communicate that to your team. The downside to that is all the stresses and fears of what might happen I feel presently as well. And so that book really helped me realize, like, hey, it's good that you're futuristic thinking, but really there's power in being present in the moment.
Yeah, one really cool thing for our listeners, Dallin used to host the largest multifamily meetup in Arizona with Rev, and with his leadership created this amazing meetup and amazing experience, and pretty awesome that hero of yours ended up showing up at the meetups you were hosting.
Well, you said that you got a chance to meet him there, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a chance to meet Robert Kiyosaki at one of Dallin's events, and he came to your event.
Yeah, that was...
and not just, he just showed up.
He showed up. One of the attendees knew him, and they're like, hey, we're going to this real estate event. You want to go? And he's like, sure. So I remember it vividly. He's in there, and it was a pretty big room, and I'm networking, welcoming people, and like 2 or 3 people are like, hey, Robert Kiyosaki's over there. And I'm like, no way. Like, no, he's not. Like, there's no way he's over there. But like, I see this man that like has this like Japanese Hawaiian type of side profile, and so like I start panning around. I'm like, wait, could it be? And sure enough, like I literally, the people I was networking with, I completely left them in the dust. I was just like so locked in. I was so locked in. I'm trying to figure out if that was actually Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah. And as soon as it was crazy. And so I went right up to him. And I said, hey, you probably hear this all the time. I think there's 3 other people standing in line to talk to him. And I was like, no, this is my event. I'm going to go up. I'm going to introduce myself. So I welcomed him, and I said, you probably hear this all the time, but your book literally changed my life. I said, I read that book, and 2 weeks later, we had our first investment property. And he was like, I thank you for sharing. I don't hear that enough. I think he's a liar when he told me that, but it made me feel good. And I said, I want to be respectful to your time, but would you mind taking a few minutes and speaking to our group? And he said, sure, I'd be happy to. So once we started the event, I welcomed everyone. Half the people didn't even know he was in the room. So when I'm like, hey, guys, we got a special guest, Robert Kiyosaki's in the house, everyone's like, okay. Yeah. And then sure enough, he stands up and comes up on stage. So that was a really cool moment because I could say that I shared a stage with Robert Kiyosaki, and just having that influence that changed my life and being able to have that come full circle, super cool. And that was nothing. I didn't plan that. I wasn't like, one day I'm going to share a stage with Robert. Yeah. None of that, that just happened. And I'm grateful it did.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about what your philosophy is or what your vision is when it comes to leadership now, especially being a part of 2 different businesses and companies. Like what's the vision? What's your style of leadership in, pushing things forward in your life currently?
So I'll be honest, when you sent me some of the questions you were going to be asking and focusing this on leadership, I struggled with some of it. And so it gave me a chance to really reflect and just kind of process on who I am as a person and how to answer these questions. And again, looking back on life, I think I always had that natural ability to lead, even though I didn't recognize it. Mm-hmm. And I think other people did. because there was opportunities on sports teams. I was always seemed to always be called as the captain. In church functions, I was called to lead in different capacities. And that was stuff I never asked for. I didn't aspire to it. I didn't ask for it. It just kind of happened. And I think with time and repetition of that, I started gaining clarity and starting to see in myself what maybe other people did earlier on. And I think that's hard for us as business owners and as people. We're always so hard on ourselves. So when you ask some of those questions, it was kind of hard for me to answer because I don't really consider myself a leader, if that makes sense. But obviously I got to be if I'm running 2 businesses.
Yeah.
So it gave me a chance to kind of reflect on maybe how that happened. For me, I kind of fall in the line of like, if you can show someone how to do it, don't tell them how to do it type of thing. So kind of leading by example. And that's been good because I'm often down in the trenches with our team, with people. It inspires them. But at the same time, when you're trying to scale a business, you can't be stuck down in the trenches. So I'm actually in this weird transitional period where I'm trying to remove myself out of the trenches, and there's a lot of guilt that comes with that as well. Because my whole life was working. Like if you're a team captain on a sports team, people are relying on you, and like you got to perform. You don't remove yourself. So like what I'm realizing is like I'm going from player. I went from player to team captain, and now I'm transitioning to coach. So coach oversees the field, the play, make sure the right people are in the right position. But that's a weird transition because my whole life I've always been the player and the captain, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. That's perfect.
So it's weird. I'm in a weird spot. It's exciting. It's stressful, but I mentioned earlier that I tend to be very futuristic thinking, sometimes to a fault. So looking back on what I think helps me be a good leader is having people see the vision. I get excited about it. I am who I am. I'm genuine. I'm authentic. Before we started recording, we were having a bunch of laughs and a good time. And I think people pick up on that as well. They know I'm not just blowing smoke. And when I can visualize something or see it, I get excited and I get confident about it. And I think that can be contagious. And so it's just getting people excited about the future and the vision. And another thing I'm learning about myself is that I'm pretty terrible at communicating that vision verbally. Like I have it up here, but then trying to communicate it to people can be very difficult sometimes. I like to say I'm a very simple person. I got a simple vocabulary, and I'm not very eloquent with my speech. Like I grew up, I went to a high school with I graduated with 87 kids in the country of New York, right? I probably didn't have the best education out there. But I think that simple language actually helps connect with people because I use simple terms. Like I don't think I've used any fancy word this entire interview yet. So one of the things I've learned and gotten better at is how to take what's up here and put it into words and trying to understand where other people are coming from. Because I might try to convey it a certain way, they interpret it a different way, and we can butt heads about it, or we can figure out why they're interpreting it that way and how I could communicate it better. So that's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. Have you learned any tricks like to verify, understanding with some of your team?
Just ask. Ask for more clarity.
Yeah.
And Drew, I know you're big into sales. Oftentimes when somebody says something, we might jump to a conclusion, or we think they mean something else. So we try to jump to a solution, and that's not at all what they cared about or what they were really asking. And I'm realizing we've all been brought up different ways. We might look at the same word and define it 3 different ways. And so this happened we had an annual team meeting yesterday, and our marketing person was like, I've never been a part of something like this, and this is super cool. And so I was like, can you help me understand what this means? What does this mean? That can mean so many different things, right? So part of it was for my own clarity. And also that's one of the tactics too, that I've realized with time to get more buy-in from other people. Because if they can re-explain it in a simple term or reaffirm it coming out of their mouth and they believe it, then you get more buy-in and more commitment from those people as well. So it was kind of twofold. It's like, what do you mean by that? And let's solidify that thought even more, because obviously you're excited about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, part of that role as a leader isn't just the vision, but how do we communicate that vision, and how do we use shared language so we all understand what each other's saying about said vision.
Yeah.
How has that played a role in not just your business but in life? Like, where have you seen those ideas of leadership coming, maybe with your kids, maybe with your family, maybe with your friends, people you're networking with?
Honestly, I think kids are probably the best way to practice and learn leadership.
Yeah.
They'll probably test your patience just as much, if not more, than employees or coworkers or other people that you're working with. In other areas of my life, I would say right now, like, we're in the thick of it. Like, being a dad, we got 4 little kids. We got a 1-year-old, 3-year-old, 6-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And the 6-year-old has special needs, so it's actually like he himself is like 2 or 3 kids. So even though we only have 4, we feel like we have 5 or 6. Paul over here has got 5, so he's definitely got me beat. But my wife and I are really in the thick of it with kids. I mean, and they're so dependent on you at this point. And so, talking about leadership, one of the things my wife and I, gratefully, were both on the same page about, if you're old enough to do it and we know you're capable of doing it, you do it. Like, my 9-year-old daughter, she's on the gas stove cooking mac and cheese, making herself. She's using the oven, making garlic bread. Like, she's pretty, like, not that I would do this, full disclaimer, not that I would do this. She's one we could probably leave at home for a week and would be fine. I wouldn't do it, but that's literally where she's at. She does her own laundry. She knows how to pick up. She does her own schoolwork. We homeschool our kids, so she does a self-paced thing. So when it comes to our kids, my wife and I are very focused on empowering them to become independent, to take care of themselves. One, because we're getting burned out. When you're taking care of 4 little kids that need so much from you, the more we can delegate to them and teach them and show them, hey, you can do this. Not only does it boost their spirits and confidence, but it takes workload off of us. And I'm realizing it's literally no different with employees or coworkers. The more you can empower them and show them, like, hey, you can do this. I believe in you. Not only do they come to you less for things, but they feel proud and confident because they're learning new skills and they're creating this attitude of autonomy.
Yeah, that's funny on your point of just, kids kind of being that mirror for yourself and kind of checking you and keeping you honest.
I love it and I hate it.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Yeah, a couple days ago, my soon-to-be 5-year-old daughter, she was asking for something, and I told her, maybe here in a little bit, which is something I say all the time, and she spouted right back. She goes, Dad, every time you say that, it never happens. And it was just kind of like, what a sobering moment. Like, you're right.
Yeah, you want to be like, whoosh, but you can't. My daughter, it's always the daughters. Yeah. I don't know what it's. My 9-year-old's the same exact way. But yeah, it keeps you humble too, because you're like, you're not wrong. I didn't like hearing that, but you're not wrong. So
can't argue. I mean, you can't. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's typically how that it goes. So
yeah. Dallin, could you give us any examples of maybe a time when you feel like you've led others to a vision you had or a goal as a team, and how that was accomplished?
I'd say more recently, the last 2 businesses we started. So the first one being the real estate fund. I don't come from a financial background. I come from a real estate family, but had this vision of launching a real estate fund and helping other people like us get into real estate. So rather than buying the fourplex, invest into a fund like we have, and we go out and we buy a few hundred units. And so now you diversify that investment over a few hundred units. And so this was something that I learned over the last few years and put together a team to help us execute on that. And now we're working with investors. I have a conversation with someone tomorrow that's most likely going to invest $350,000, which is awesome. And like, that's not the first one that's invested that amount of money with us. And so taking a vision and an idea and then getting people on board to execute on it is super cool. Now, I will say things don't always work out the way you envision it. And that's one thing I struggle with, because I have this idea, I have this vision, I want to execute on it. Things happen. Life happens, and maybe the way you think you want it to go isn't the way it actually goes. So there's ups and downs, and having people just stick with me through things has been incredible. I mean, Paul here, that's running the equipment for us, he reached out to me a few years ago, kind of like you did, Drew, and you're like, hey, I see you're in real estate, I want to pick your brain a little bit. And now here, Paul and I are launching a software company. We're not engineers, we're not software engineers, we're not tech people, we're real estate people, but we were able to take our complementary skill sets, identify a need in the marketplace, and then we empowered other people. We just finished a 2-day meeting here, our annual meeting at the office. We had people come in from 3 different states. We had our VAs from the Philippines on Zoom. Like, it's cool. It's kind of cool just having people in different areas, and we all come together saying, okay, this is who we are. We talked about our core values, our core focus, and this is where we're going. And so I'd say those are the more recent ones. And just when you can find people that share that same vision, or they can resonate with it, and you can turn things over to them, that's a cool feeling.
So on that, and it kind of ties to both. I mean, in our world, we kind of talk about it more as like within the organizations or our teams, but with the trust level. But when you're talking some of the investor groups and stuff that you're doing, up to $350,000 with the guy that you mentioned, that takes a huge level of trust for people to turn that over to you. And like, what have you learned around that element of trust and kind of building it and breaking it and,
hopefully not breaking it very often.
Yeah. Well, and I don't mean you specifically, but I'm sure you've had experiences where maybe somebody broke yours.
Yeah.
And
so when it comes to money and finances, I don't have any statistics on this. I've heard this before, that it's the number one reason people get divorced. Couples get divorced. They're fighting over finances. They can't agree on it. As a society, I think finances and money, it triggers a lot of emotions in people, for good or bad. So having people building that trust apart with money is difficult, especially in large sums like that. And what I've realized, and what we see a lot of times in our space, is people. I compare it to a relationship, right? My wife and I, our very first date, I didn't ask her to marry me that night. Or even the next day, yeah. Like, really? Surprisingly, like even though I'm Mormon, even that's fast for me, right? But that first night wasn't like, that was dating, right? But when it comes to money and asking, especially money with investors, what I realize is a lot of people, they'll meet somebody at a meetup, or they'll meet them at an event, and they're like, "Hey, I got this awesome deal. Do you want to throw in $100K into it?" It's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know your background. And so just like that first date with my wife, we dated. We got to know each other. We shared each other's past, history, all of that, to a point where we both felt comfortable moving forward, taking that next step. Now, that next step was just asking her to marry me. It still wasn't, hey, let's get married. Yeah, we're doing it, right? So there's steps along that relationship. But for some reason, when it comes to business, when it comes to investors and money, we think we can jump from that first date to marriage. And I think a lot of that, I mentioned this earlier at the start of the podcast, we live in a society where instant gratification is all around us.
Yeah. Totally.
Like, I don't know, there's probably people that are going to be listening to this that don't remember the pain of having to rewind a VHS. Or even having to go into Blockbuster on a Friday night. Like, that was a Friday night movie night. Yep. We'd go rent 2 movies.
And they didn't have the one you wanted.
And they didn't have the one you wanted, so you have to find some other. But we live in this society now where that instant gratification, if people aren't getting that dopamine hit quick enough, they're done. And they're moving on to the next thing. And so, again, at the start, I said, I don't think knowledge is so much what's going to differentiate successful business owners and leaders. I believe it's that discipline and that work ethic, because I don't care if you're starting a business now or if it was 30, 40 years ago, there's nothing quick about it. Now, there's tools that can help accelerate that and maybe expand your reach and can help make it go a little bit quicker. but you're still on average, I'd say 3 to 5 years for a business to really start growing.
Oh yeah,
Minimum.
Yeah.
And people want it, if they don't see it in 6 months, like, bad idea, I'm going to move on to another business idea. And rather than focusing on one thing, they're swirling around. They're jumping around, and then they wonder why they can't make anything work.
Yeah.
And then what does that do to their spirit, their soul, right? They're like, oh, I suck, I fail, I can't make anything work. It's like, you can make anything work, just stick with it.
Yeah. A word that's come up several times throughout our conversation today and even before the podcast started was empower. Just tell me your thoughts about empowering others and how that's been a part of your life or part of leadership.
It started with my parents empowering me as a kid. Just teaching me how to work, teaching me how to earn things. We didn't have much. We had enough for our needs to be taken care of. I remember, and I always had like an expensive taste. Even as a kid, like I didn't want the Walmart soccer cleats. I wanted the Nike Vapors that were $250. And so I learned to work and I learned to have those things. And I don't know why I like nice things. It's just part of who I am. but I like the studio. Like, I don't know if we share this, but this is our first recording in this studio, which is super, super cool. But when it comes to nice things, my parents, they were like, okay, if you want that, either you pay for it yourself, or if it's that important to you, we'll pay for half if you come up with the other half. So at a young age, my parents always taught me to be empowered, to empower myself. And I think that is why I do that with my kids as well. So empowerment, I'd say, just flows into everything in our life. And I'm blessed and grateful that that was a part of my life, because I think it's made, not that business is easy or being a leader is easy, but I think it's helped because we're taking that same tone into our businesses. Because the more you empower people, again, you're building their confidence, and they're resolving things on their own without sucking time and energy from you. Now we're there for support, just like my kids. If they ever need anything, 100% we're there to help them. But if it's something we think they can handle on their own, we'll tell them that, and we'll encourage them.
Why do you think you're going back to what you said about going from that player to captain to coach, why do you think it's sometimes hard to empower others? Why is it hard to get out of the way of your team, out of the way of your business partners, out of the way of those you're working with?
For me, it's when you're a player and you're a captain, you're in the trenches, you're involved, you're actively doing it. And when you grow up that way and you do that for so long, that just becomes your comfort zone. And it's hard for me, and I'm working through it, because I know I have to if I want to scale and grow. When you go from the player that's on the field to the coach that's standing on the sideline with that bigger vision and coaching, I think now that I think about it, part of it might be like I feel like I'm losing a part of my identity, because I've been a player for so long. But now that realizing I have to transition, it's like I got to become someone new, and there's new skill sets, new techniques, new things. Now I can take that experience from being a player to help me be a better coach. But again, I feel like the weird transition that I'm in right now. So for me, I think it's because for so long I was on the field and that was my comfort zone, and now I'm leaving it.
Yeah.
It's funny, within my own personal career, I experienced some of that. And it's weird when you go from that day to day, like you can see physically what you accomplished, or, it was real clear. And you kind of make that transition, and it goes more into, a coaching aspect. And you're like, man, I don't have as much of the tangible. And me and my brother talked about it a lot. And, he reminded me really well one time that, stop and step back and look at all the things that you're touching, that, all the decisions, conversations you've had that have led to other things. And that alone kind of really helped me to kind of absorb it a little differently. So,
and that's part of being present. And that's why that was that third book I mentioned, was The Power of Now. Because when you're present in the moment, it enables you to see what's present and enjoy that moment. But also, for me, it slows my brain down enough to be able to reflect on the back. And like, Drew, I know why we're talking today, because I was in my car. I just dropped off my brother-in-law. You called me to ask me about my fourplex. You were really calling me to sell me insurance, is what you were doing. but you
I
got
had
me.
double
And
motives.
this is before I knew more about sales and influence and persuasion. But you call me, you're like, hey, I've been following you on social media. I want to get into real estate, which you did. Like, you were being genuine about it. And so you started getting me talking about myself and real estate, and it makes you feel all good and important. And you're like, oh, hey, by the way, can I give you an insurance quote on your car? And I did. And by the way, I'm still with them, even though you're not.
He told that story on the way here. He forgot to leave out the part you actually bought the insurance.
Yeah, I actually bought it. But at the same time, you offered a good product. You were genuine, and I was saving money. So like, why would I say no to that too? And I think that's important. I know we're not talking about sales on this conversation, but if you're providing value, people will pay. And if you are who you are, if you're genuine, if you're authentic, people will pay. But talking about that experience, like, I remember that was, 4 or 5 years ago. It was like right
longer
around
than that, I think. But
was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's what jumpstarted. And even though we crossed paths previously, I think that's really what jumpstarted the relationship to what we have
Totally.
today. So people come into your lives at different points for different reasons, and you don't know who you're going to be working with, partnered with. Paul and I, like, my wife delivered his first baby before we ever. His wife's baby, but you know what I mean.
Right.
But when they had their first kid, my wife was the nurse at the hospital that delivered them. So we kind of always crossed paths, but it wasn't until 3 or 4 years ago that we actually partnered up. And so people are going to cross your paths, and as you strive to be a leader and just a good person, you'll start attracting those different people that you want in your life.
Yeah.
And kind of on that. Sorry, Drew.
Oh, go ahead.
No, but we think of leader as, a position, or a lot of people do sometimes. And I think it's important to point out that, like, it has nothing to do with the position. It has everything to do with who you are and how you're interacting with people and communicating. And so, yeah, whether it's sales or, CEO, everybody has the potential.
Yeah, I think sometimes we want to put leader into this really defined box when it really, like, there's so much it impacts, and so much influence it can have in so many different areas of your everyday reach. And so that's really why we want to talk about being an everyday leader. Is it doesn't mean you have the title necessary. It doesn't mean you're the politician that got elected. It doesn't have to be like you're selected as this leader. Like, you can be a leader whether or not you're leading a business. And I think back to that time too. Like, there was a lot of leadership I got from you, and you encouraging me. You shared that same book with me. I bought my first rental property within a few months as well. And and I've constantly seen you throughout your career. Like, and it's funny because sometimes I think we feel like, oh, we don't know anything. We don't
Every day.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing. And then if we're just a little bit further down the path, it's like people start reaching out to us for our help and our advice, and you've constantly been willing to share that with people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why you've done so well, networking so well, because building your business, building your brand. The mustache has really helped.
It helps.
The look has helped your brand.
Does it have a name by chance?
It does not, but that's
okay.
Get it trademarked. Yeah,
trademarked.
So it's just been awesome to see how your career, and you may not view it as leadership, but I have viewed it as a form of leadership where you've constantly helped other people get what they want and connect people to one another. You came to an event we hosted recently and talked about the power of networking and how that's helped your career. And networking is another thing that could be viewed. We may not view it as leadership, but it's a form of leadership in a sense.
Yeah, and I said this earlier, and when it comes to communication, one word that you share, we might have 3 different definitions about it. And so I think that's why I kind of struggled with this whole leadership thing, because when you say it like that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I am a leader, but maybe my thought, my idea, my definition of what a leader is a little bit different. And like for me, like I said, I don't seek those opportunities for leadership. Like those conversations we had, that was me being me.
Right.
That was me being genuine. Like I just wanted, I experienced something that changed my life, and I was thrilled to share whatever little experience that was with you. And that's happened time and time again. And I think that's just something that's part of me. And maybe that's why it's hard for me to view myself as a leader, because I'm just being me. And then there's other people that do aspire for those leadership roles, and they learn the skills that they need, and they improve. And so I don't think there's one right way or one path to be a leader. I think at the end of the day, if you're making an impact and you're improving people's lives for the better, you're a leader. That can be in business, that can be in religion, it could be in politics. And politics is a hot topic right now, but you could be a leader if you're influencing people to do good. Well, and you could be a leader and influence people to do bad as well, because you're still influencing and persuading them, right? But I think if you can get anybody on board with your vision, then you're some level of leader.
Yeah, it's one of the ways I try to get people, and I love the word intent and living with intent, because it makes it real kind of clear, and that you have a purpose and you kind of know where you're going. But I talk to people like everyone is a leader, and they just need to choose to be and accept it. And even if all you're doing or the only way you see yourself is leading your family at a very basis, like, do it with intent.
Yeah.
And say, like, we're gonna be this as a family, and I'm gonna help you guys do whatever. I'm gonna be a good father. And we talked a little bit before we got started today about some of the decisions you made recently about having more time with your family and living more intent and being present. And I think that's just one small example that I think most people can relate to, is, if nothing else, their family.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because when we hear like leader, I think we often jump to like CEO or
president,
or some of these big titles. But I love what you're saying there, Tate, because literally you can be a leader in your own home.
Yeah,
and you should be.
And you should be.
Yeah,
you should be. You need to be, especially as us as men, as husbands, as fathers. Like that's our duty. That's our job. But I think that brings up a really good point, and maybe that's what I struggle with, because I think of leaders up here, and I'm like, oh no, I still got a long ways to go. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, think about how much easier it is, like, if you can live in that space of leadership with your family with intent to go to that next step, whether that's local politics or volunteering for a board or starting a business venture. Like, if you already kind of understand and think with that intent, like, those next steps are so much easier.
And leadership, I think, inspires other people. And this is not meant to take away anything, but I think for me, seeing you, we're about the same age, we have kids the same age, to see you going out and buying real estate, I'm like, well, if he's doing it, maybe I could do that. And it created this realization that, like, there's ways for me to get into this outside of what I thought was actually possible.
Yes, and what you said there is huge, because I've gone through the same things. Like, the only reason I'm buying large apartment buildings is, previous to that, I thought it was some rich people out of like India or Dubai or New York City or Los Angeles. And when I learned that it was people like you and I putting our resources together, I was like, okay. And then I met some of these people doing it. And like, I know you shouldn't judge, like, first impressions. I'm talking like dad jeans, New Balance sneakers, like these people that you would not envision as a successful real estate guru owning hundreds of units.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it, type of thing. And so I don't think that's wrong to do that. And I think that, going back to empowering, I think it can be very empowering. But again, like talking like that first date with my wife, I didn't have that date and then ask her to marry me. Stuff had to happen in between.
Yeah.
And a lot of us might have an idea or a vision of where we want to go, where we want to be, but we don't know what those milestones look like. We don't know what those steps are. And if you find somebody that is there, like, take them on as a mentor. I think they'll help you a lot. But in reality, even that might feel overwhelming. So can you find somebody that's 2 steps ahead of you, not 10 steps? And can you pick their brain, figure out what they did, and then get to that level? And then once you're there, find somebody that's a few steps ahead of that, right? So taking it in more bite-sized chunks, I think, is important. And when you can look at someone and say, I've done it, like, I take no offense to it, I've done it. If they can do it, I can do it. That's empowering. You're empowering yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge, because so many of us have all these negative thoughts up here.
Right.
And my wife shared this with me literally yesterday, because she deals with it with other things outside the business, being a mom and that mom guilt and stuff of raising kids. But she was listening to this podcast, and they were saying, like, these thoughts up here, they're not yours. You're the one that's just choosing to listen to it. And I thought that was really fascinating, because, like, having a conversation like this, I feel like this is our thoughts. This is who we are later today, tomorrow, we're going to have some negative self-doubt thought, something that creeps into our mind. It's part of being a human. But I think recognizing that those thoughts aren't ours, they're influenced by maybe subconsciously, maybe from a critical parent or somebody at a young age that comes up at those times that we're looking to excel, recognizing that that's not me. Like those thoughts are coming from somewhere else. I don't know where. Put it aside and focus on who you really are.
So, go ahead. When you're talking about like your network and what you built and the leadership, you know, at the event the other night, you had even kind of alluded to, you know, almost shrinking your network in some ways and expanding it in other ways. And, you know, what kind of thoughts go into that? I think that's something that a lot of people, successful people, have to come to terms with at some point is, man, there's some people that just aren't helping or contributing.
Being a successful business owner is not a popularity contest. And that's something, I was a popular kid in school. I played all the sports. I was a jock.
You fooled me.
Girl. And when you grow up that way, you develop this sense of entitlement. So for a while, like I thought being a successful business owner or being a good leader is how popular you are. And so you tend to try to grow your network wide because you want to be known, you want to feel important. And I realized through the last few years that there's a lot of people that shouldn't be in that circle with you. When you have a vision or idea or goal of where you want to be, you need to get those, identify who those people are out and get them out as quick as possible. And so when I talk about my network shrinking, I would say I've been more intentional with it, and it's expanding now. But for a while, I had to cut out. I had to cut out, shrink, get around the few people that actually energize me, that I feel empowered, that think the same way that I do. And then once I gravitate around those people, I tap into their networks. And so my network is expanding, and that's why we've been able to experience the success that we have. But I think most people, if you haven't started yet, or maybe you have, you need to figure out who in your life you need to cut out. And that might be family. A lot of times it probably is family. And that's one of the hardest things people have to do, is because we're raised like, no, your family's, they're your blood. Like, you got to be there for them. How many people are taken advantage of, abused by family? Like, I don't care if you're blood or not. If you're toxic, if you're negative, get them out of your life, and you'll find family and people that aren't blood. And that's, I think, what's been a cool journey in growing this business. There's people I would do business with tomorrow, today, and there's family members I wouldn't.
Yeah. I think that's extremely valuable, probably, for a lot of people to hear that, like, because I think that's something a lot of people struggle with is coming to that realization and maybe even accepting that that's reality. But Dan Martell, he was talking the other day, and on one of his reels, he talking about don't expect your family to understand, or not even family, but friends to understand what you're doing if it's something they've never done. And thinking you're crazy, because how can you expect them to understand if they've never done it? And so
one of the best pieces of advice, like, don't take advice from anyone that hasn't been where you want to go. Right. But they're the ones that are going to be the most critical and the loudest. Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
Why would you even listen to them? Why would you even allow that? And I think part of it's because we crave that support. We want that love. We want that support, especially from people close to us, family, friends. And unfortunately, I would argue, say in most cases, that's not where you're going to find it. And I hate to say that, because you feel like that's who you should be getting it from. You should be able to get it from close friends and family. But you guys have probably heard this before. It really resonates with me. Once you make that conscious decision to start changing your life and empowering yourself and becoming a true leader, an entrepreneur, a business owner, it takes a lot of self-improvement and self-development. And you start making changes in your life where other people aren't. And they see you making those changes. Drew's been incredible at working out and eating healthy for the last few years, and I've seen that journey, and I start feeling uncomfortable and like judging him, because I'm like, I don't need that, right? Naturally, that's what I do, but true leaders, good business owners, good entrepreneurs, like, that's motivating to me, actually. Yeah. But in a typical setting, most people would start, I would start tearing Drew down. Why are you dedicating so much time to that? Shouldn't you spend that time doing other things? In reality, it's my own insecurities coming out that I'm projecting onto Drew. So unfortunately, a lot of times when we start making those significant changes to become a better leader, to become a better business owner, oftentimes those people closest to us, friends, family, will start saying things like that. And whether it's intentional or non-intentional, you got to push past that, because if you listen to that, it's going to tear you back down, because they want to keep you at the same level they are, because they're seeing you improve and it's making them feel uncomfortable with the choices that they're choosing not to make.
Yeah, and I've experienced that on at least a small level, and just as you grow, and not to say your personality changes, but what the way you interact probably does, the way you come off, the way you, and it's interesting to see how people don't always like that. Like they kind of want you to stay the same person you always were.
It's part of life.
Yeah.
Talk to any successful business owner, they'll share something very, very similar.
Well, Dallin, what would you say is the legacy, or like the way you want to be remembered as a leader? If we had to fast forward and look down the road, like, and it's like, hey, Dallin was, or Dallin is, like, how would you want people to remember what you've done, what you built? Maybe not so much the actual business success, but like as a leader, how would you want to be perceived and remembered?
I want people to have the confidence and the courage to act on those that thing inside of them that they want to pursue, that they keep putting aside. So if nothing else, if I could just instill courage and confidence to take action, like, I think that would be my biggest thing. And the action might be the wrong action, and that's okay. So, and that's where the courage and the confidence comes in, knowing that at least you're moving in the right direction. Like, I can't tell you, we've made a lot of money, we've lost a lot of money in real estate, and that's what people don't talk about. But all those actions have got me exactly where I am today, and that only happened because of the confidence and courage I had into making actions and not sitting there twiddling my thumbs, getting stuck in this analysis paralysis. So if there's anything I can instill with people that are in my sphere, in my group, or people that I'm leading, have that courage and confidence to take action and know that it may not be the right one, but that's what's going to get you on your path, whatever that path is, and it's going to be different than mine.
It's awesome to hear you say that, because I think you're actually living that now. I've seen that. We went to a conference a few months ago, and there was an incredible speaker on stage, and he has a podcast, and he talked about, like, wanting to coach and starting to share what he does, and I just remember you saying, yeah, you can do this, you can start, and I think he has. So, and might be because of what you said to him, might be because of others who've encouraged him as well. And it's just awesome to see you're like living that legacy of what you want to be. What would you say if someone's new in the journey and striving to become a leader? Like, what advice would you give somebody that's maybe starting on that path right now? Maybe they've taken the first step, but they just feel like, hey, how can I become a better leader?
When I look at the leaders that have influenced me in my life, they cared about me. I don't even know why I'm getting emotional right now. I guess I look at my father, and early on, some just men in my life, when I was a teenager going through some rough times, those leaders, they cared about me. They were there for me. Wow, this came out of nowhere. Great question. So when I look at the leaders in my life, I think it's the ones that truly believed in me and inspired me, and they meant it, and you can feel it. Like, there's some bullshit leaders out there that, like, know what to say, but, like,
and I'd argue they may not even really be a leader,
and they
may
not
just
even
be
a leader,
position or a title,
right? But I think those ones that truly inspire you, believe in you, and when I say, like, I want to be that person that gives somebody that confidence and courage to take action, I think that stems from those people in my early life that instilled that in me, not realizing it. It could be coaches.
Yeah.
There's one of your business partners, Josh Tilley, like, incredible human being. He loves the youth. He loves young men, the young women, and just figuring out how to empower them and help them become the best versions of themselves. Like, that is incredible. And so if you can instill that confidence and courage, and then just believe in people and let them know that.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know that. And like, especially for me, if you guys are familiar with the 5 love languages,
Yeah.
words of affirmation is my number one. Like, you tell me my mustache looks good, it makes my day.
You
It
do
makes
look
my
amazing,
day.
if that helps.
And maybe that's why I have it, is because I'm like seeking those compliments or those words of affirmation. But when you work with a team, when you're working with people, you don't always know if you're making an impact. And so for me, and I would argue for a lot of people, getting that feedback, whether it's good or bad, is critical. But back to your question, Drew, I think really looking at the leaders, it's the ones that truly cared, and they believed in whatever I felt my pursuit was. And that can change.
Yeah.
That can change over time. But wherever I was at that point in my life, they're like, you've got it. I know you can do it. I believe in you. Get after it.
Awesome. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah.
Well, just I guess to summarize, first off, thanks, Dallin. Really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today and share some of those insights. And I guess our hope is that you'll feel empowered as a leader from this today. And yeah, I guess some of my big takeaways are just the importance of empowering others. Maybe you're further down the path that you realize, and you could
Probably.
well, and just
I'm going to say you are.
well, that even those listening, you might be further down the road than you realize you are, and you can actually be a leader for somebody else. You don't have to have the social status on Instagram
Right.
to be a leader. Like, you can do that wherever you are in your journey, I guess. But to wrap up, if people want to connect with you, if people want to hear more about what you do or get involved in the real estate or your software and what you've created, like, how can they connect, and where would be the best place for them to go?
All social media profiles. And when I say all, I don't even know TikTok. Like, I'm not on TikTok. I think our marketing team has a business profile on there, but LinkedIn and Instagram are probably where I spend the majority of my time. And just Dallon Schultz is the handle. I'm even on Facebook as well. But yeah, that's probably the best place just to get connected and see what's going on in my life professionally and personally. And always happy to connect with more people.
Any plugs you want to give either of your businesses? And we didn't talk a whole lot about
It's not about
your actual
it's not
business,
about,
but
it's not about the business. I appreciate the question.
Do you have any upcoming events or speaking gigs or anything where, if people wanted to pop in?
Nothing live.
Okay.
Nothing live. We put on some virtual workshops, but that's more for our software. So if anyone listening is in real estate and wants to raise private capital, we have a CRM solution to help them do that on autopilot. So if that's something that people are interested in, or if people want to get involved in real estate investing passively and get involved in large apartments without having to worry about the tenants, termites, and toilets, then happy to have a conversation and see if we're a good fit.
That's amazing.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks again, Dallin. We appreciate you doing this interview with us, and for the insights you shared. Those were
Appreciate it,
really
guys.
powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.